Well, it's a day later and I'm a few dollars poor. Dollars. Anyways, yeah, so I took a trip into the city of Worcester, Massachusetts today with the intention of getting myself one of these little plugs right here. Well, let me tell you, I went to a place that I had gone to for quite a few years over my lifetime, Stark Wholesale Electronics on Franklin Street in Worcester. And I think the first time I ever went there, I was probably about 14 years old. So, anyways, drove up there today, and as soon as I started pulling up to the building, I realized something was wrong. The building was a different color. It was freshly painted. All of the signage was gone, nothing to indicate what the place was, and there were a bunch of banged up cars in the parking lot because it's been taken over by the auto body shop that was next door. They've kind of expanded. So, first I had hoped that maybe they had just relocated to another location, but there weren't any signs indicating that they had moved. And when I looked them up online and Googled them, sure enough, it came up as permanently closed. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. The last time I had gone in there was probably about 3 years ago, and the same gentleman who owned it back when I went in there when I was 14 years old. Well, let's just say 20 plus years later, and actually 30 plus years later, he was still there. I guess he decided to get out of the business. So, unfortunately, they are no more. And the reason why that's unfortunate is because it was one of the last places around here where if you were an electronic hobbyist, you could walk in and buy, neat stuff for your projects. He had, a large inventory of capacitors and resistors and also a lot of surplus stuff. He would get surplus electronics, and you'd find interesting things that you could cannibalize for parts and buy them cheap and all kinds of stuff like that. So, vacuum tubes, new and used. Well, I digress. So I'm like, well, now what am I going to do? So I searched for electronics in the city, and of course I find like places repairing electronics, although there's not a lot of those around anymore either. And I finally stumbled upon a name that I recognize, Radio Shack. I said, oh, that's right. I remembered there was a Radio Shack over in Webster Square Plaza in Worcester. So I called the number, and sure enough, they're still there. They're one of the only, I believe the young lady at the store told me, they are the last Radio Shack store open in Worcester County, this entire county. So there may be some others in other pockets of Massachusetts, but even Radio Shack's a far cry from what it used to be as far as inventory on hand. I mean, I remember when they just had pegboard after pegboard of integrated circuits, common op amps and stuff like that, diodes, resistors, all kinds of stuff. Well, now they've got just like these trays that you open up, and they're not very well stocked. So I did find, though, 3.5 millimeter stereo plug, and I actually had a couple to choose from. This one was a little bit cheaper, but this thing still cost me like $4.49 plus tax, because it's the gold plated phono plug. Yeah, I wonder how thin of a layer of gold they can get away with putting on this thing and still be able to legally call it gold plated. But anyways, so this one was $4.49 because it's got solder terminals. They actually have one with screw terminals that's 50 cents more. I don't need that. So, anywho, let's see if we can't get into some trouble here. Hopefully this is decent quality for what they charge for it. What steams my bean about this is that I probably have an old Switchcraft new in the package somewhere kicking around here, and I just can't seem to put my hand on where I've got that stuff stored right now. Oh, I got this little coil strain relief here. Yeah, well, that's not going to do me much good for this. Alright, let's figure this out. Well, I've been looking for a while now. I found the 150 ohm resistor I need, but then I need two 7.5k ohm resistors or 7500 ohm resistors, and I haven't been able to find those. So what I decided I'm going to go with is I'm going to go with I had higher than that, 8.2 I think, or something like that, which would attenuate it even more. So I'm going to actually go with a little bit lower than that. These are, let's see, black, brown, red, orange, yellow, green, 6,800 ohms, 6.8k, is that right? 6.8k. So these are a little bit lower. These will attenuate it a little bit less, but I do have that volume control that I can always tweak if I need to. So that's what I'm going to go with. That's going to be my U circuit, basically. Oops. Basically, it's going to look like that, only I'm going to put it together in a more streamlined package. Now this has to go across here like this. But I want to try and make this package as small as possible, so I want to try and sneak this resistor into here a little sideways so that when I wrap this all up, it's a little skinnier. That's the tricky part. Alright, believe it or not, that is actually it. Now I need to try and isolate this line here, because it's going to have a tendency to want to short out against this one when this cable is twisted or moved. So I think I can get this right over the top of both of these. Yeah, sure can. Too long. Alright. Alright, now, well, this wasn't going to be able to go over this resistor network anyway, so I'm going to have a real problem with this strain relief. I'm going to probably have to tack on some wires to this. Some insulated wire. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tack on some insulated wire, and then I'm going to isolate this one, and then heat shrink this whole thing. Alright, so what I just did was I cut 3 tiny little pigtails of wire, and I soldered them on here. So I've got one going to the ground, and one going to the left channel, and one going to the right channel. So the 2 that I have going to left and right channel, I'm going to tie those together, and that's where I'm going to get that mono into both channels simultaneously. And so then now I just have to solder these wires onto here, but I want to make sure that I leave room to get a little piece of heat shrink tubing in there to isolate these, and then I'll get a large piece of heat shrink tubing on here ahead of time so that I can bring this whole thing, wrap this whole thing up. I forgot to turn the camera back on, but basically all I did was I cut a little tiny piece of heat shrink tubing short enough so I could slide it out of the way and solder this connection here without the tubing shrinking from the heat. Now I slid that piece of tubing back into position, and I heat it up. I feel something sharp there, though. I wonder if I have a piece of wire sticking out there, poking through. Looks like I might. That's going to be a potential short. Well, I'm going to wrap this one anyway, so it should be okay. See, the problem is when I have the heat shrink tubing this long, what's going to happen is when I go to solder here, the heat is going to react with the tubing there and cause a problem. Oh, damn it. I forgot to put the strain relief on. Oh, I also forgot to put this. Oh, damn it. I forgot this plastic collar. This plastic collar actually acts to insulate these two connections from the screw-on metal case. Stupid. Well, it's not the end of the world. All I have to do is cut this heat shrink tubing off and unsolder those two little points there. I'm gonna need a scalpel to do that. I think I'm gonna quit for tonight. It's getting kind of late. Eyes are getting tired. All right, it's the next day. I used a razor blade, cut off my heat shrink, unsoldered these, so I can now put on this sleeve that I forgot to put on. And also the strain relief. Now the strain relief, I can't get this to fit over this resistor network, but this will fit over the resistor network. So the strain relief, let's see, if I put it here, it's going to be kind of in my way, I think. Yeah, I might be better off. Oh, looks like I'm going to have to put it on this side. Going to be close quarters here. Alright, I need some more of that extra small heat shrink tubing. Oh man, don't tell me I don't have any left of that size. One piece. I do have some black small stuff here. Let's see. Next size up, that might work though. Well, got this piece here. Let's see what we can do. It started to shrink because of the heat of the soldering, as I had suspected it might do. Should have cut that back just a hair further. I can't get this piece to go over that other piece. Oh, it's too short. Come on. All right. So I got this all set now, I think. And you can see the bare wire there, but I don't have to worry about that grounding out on this because this actually gets moved up. And there we go. This comes up and screws over this. And then this heat shrink tubing, big piece, comes up here and goes over the whole mess. I suppose it'll fit over the outside of that strain relief, will it? Well, it's a little tight, but it might. Alright, well, before I even shrink that tubing, I'm going to do some resistance checks and see what we got. All right, how is that possible? What the hell is going on here? I got a break somewhere. Son of a gun. When I push this on, how the hell has that already happened? Yeah, I had a break here. I didn't do a good job at all putting this together, these junctions right here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to I'm going to remove this yet again. I'm going to lengthen these wires right here a little bit longer to give me a little more room to properly get a good strong connection. So, because I'm working in such tight quarters here, that's why I'm having such a hard time. Okay, so now these tiny little stranded wires that I actually took out of a Cat 5 cable, I'm going to replace those with this longer piece. And since I'm going to be going a longer distance than this little short distance here, I decided to use a little piece of shielded cable. So what I did was I sacrificed the other half of that patch cable and cut a piece out. All right, so that's going to give me a little bit of shielding. This is shielded. It's like a tiny coax cable. It's got a center conductor that's actually surrounded by a copper braid, which is the ground. But that copper braid surrounding that inner conductor acts as a shield to shield it from RF interference. All right, so I spliced on this extra piece of wire to give me a little more wiggle room, and I checked my connections, and I heat shrunk this whole resistor network in here. And so I just did my rechecked my connections, and things are working as they should. If I go from the outside shield to the shield wire here, I'm reading one of the two 6.8 k ohm resistors. From the inner connection to the inner one, I'm reading the other 6.8 k ohm resistor. And from the inner connection to the outer connection, I'm reading the 150 ohm resistor. So that's looking good so far. Now I just got to reconnect that to this, and we should be back in business and ready for a test. Just using this machinist clamp as a makeshift little vise to hold this small connector in place while I solder it. I better clean up those holes with some solder wick, or otherwise I'm going to have a heck of a time putting those new wires in. Well, I finally got this thing together. So let me clean up the bench a little bit here and we'll do our test. Okay, I'm about to conduct the first test of the hopefully improved lavalier microphone setup. Right now I don't have the microphone plugged in. I'm using the microphone built into the Hero 4, and I'm using that to get a baseline level of the audio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with the volume control on the receiver set at the lowest position, which is about 7 o'clock. Then I'm going to try 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and then 5 o'clock, which is the maximum. This is 9 o'clock. This is 12 o'clock, testing 1, 2, 3. 12 o'clock, I would expect the audio might be present, but it might still be low. This is 3 o'clock. Not sure what the audio level is right now. Hopefully it's in both channels and fairly clear. And this is 5 o'clock. This is the maximum volume setting on the receiver. So I have no idea right now what this sounds like. I'm going to have to, first I'll play it back on the GoPro, and that'll give me a little bit of an idea if this is working. And then I'm going to have to actually listen to these videos on the computer to see whether or not I've got left and right stereo present.